Good Thursday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Training camp keeps getting closer and closer. Rookies will be reporting in about a week to Berea. They'll get things underway in West Virginia a week from Saturday, first official practice of training camp. Former Browns defensive tackle Malik Jackson on the set of Good Morning Football, NFL Network, talking about what he remembers of playing with Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney.
I just think you have two first round picks, guys that want to come in. For me, being on different teams, I was able to understand that when you go to a new team, it's this guy's team. You have to really take a step back and understand what the hierarchy is and who says what goes. So I think that's what needed to be done. I think, Myles was a young player, so, his maybe leadership skills weren't the best at that time. But I think as he's gotten older, he understands what it takes. He's had a lot of guys around him to be able to show him what he needs to do. And I think he needs to take that bull by the horns and just lead more by example as far as in the classroom, because we all know what he can do on the field. But to be able to go in the classroom, command that respect, and tell guys what to do, I think is where he really needs to take that jump.
What were those conversations like in 21? Like you're on that defensive line room. You have Myles Garrett, who's this incredible talent, but it's hard to make everybody else around you better, right?
Yeah, it is. It's one of those things. Some guys just don't have it when they, you know what I mean? Especially you have, say, me and you get a Jadeveon Clowney. You have older guys in the room that can take that, but the younger guys are going to respect the guys that they want to be like. And so when Myles, he can sit in the front and relax and do his thing, but when guys are looking at him, they want to do that, but then you have an older guy saying, no, you can't do that, do this. I think he just needs to be able to transition and be more of that, like, okay, I'm going to play the game and do this and do that, even though I might not want to, but I understand these guys are looking at me, and I think that's the jump he needs to take.
Let's welcome in Quincy Carrier, Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. Quincy, I understand what Malik Jackson is saying. A player has to be who he is, personality-wise. You can't be fake. You can't be. You can't manufacture it. And I think as Myles has developed the last couple of years, I think you've heard him be more outspoken. And obviously, you and I aren't sitting in the meeting rooms, but I'm guessing he's probably assumed that a little bit more as he's gotten a little older.
Yeah, he'll probably grow into that more and more as he gets older. I believe he's not 30. Like the guys that we're comparing him to, Malik Jackson, he's plus 30. Like these are guys who are in the league because of, in large part, because they're vets, not because they're top level players. And Myles is a little bit of a different story. When you're as good at football as he is, it's not really a requirement that you are this leader. And also it's like, what's Myles Garrett going to teach somebody? How to run right past somebody? Like how to get past? Like, I'm pretty sure there's some technique stuff that he has, but like even a technique is unique to him because he's such a uniquely built individual that, yeah, this move might work. If I stick a long arm into somebody and dip underneath them, but not everybody is capable of doing that. I always think, like, when it comes to leadership, Myles, there's a level of leadership that he needs to exhibit. He doesn't need to get in a car accident because he's driving super fast. He doesn't need to have all this other stuff happen. He can certainly try to fix that and clean those things up as his career goes on. But also, I feel like the type of leadership Malik Jackson's talking about, that's going to come from a Dalvin Thomas, that caliber of player, right? Somebody who's been to a Pro Bowl, but not necessarily a perennial guy, because that's the more obtainable person that you can get the leadership from. And if you look at coaches, players who turn into coaches, they're not the superstar players all the time, right? Like there's very rarely a superstar player that also becomes a head coach. It happens every once in a while, but usually the guys who become head coach are like the really good role players, that caliber of player, because those are the guys who need to lead, and part of their value is leading. So yeah, I kind of see what Malik's saying. There's some stuff that Myles could do to just make his life a little bit easier, to make sure that he's not as open to criticism that's kind of unnecessary and not related to his play. Sure. But I think also when it comes to his leadership ability, that's just so far from the most important thing that he's asked to provide.
Yeah, and the other thing is everybody grows in their job, and that leadership is something that if he feels more comfortable, great. If not, just keep getting 16 to 20 sacks a year, and we'll call it a day. This is from Mina Kimes. It's also kind of interesting. Last year, Garrett was the only Browns edge rusher who was in the top 50. He was third for pass rush win rate. New Cleveland defensive lineman Obo Okunrankwo and Zadarius Smith were 13th and 34th, respectively. So you went from one guy in the top 50 to three. It should be a whole lot easier with those guys out on the defensive line for Myles Garrett.
Yeah, he had no help last year. Like, listen, there's no other way to put it. On no level last year did he have adequate help on that defensive line. And it showed last year, especially in the one game where Myles couldn't play against Atlanta. I mean, like, I don't know how much clearer it could be that defensive line just wasn't ready for professional football that year. And I'm dead serious when I say this, Dave. If you take Myles Garrett away from the Browns defensive line, you could have took Georgia's defensive line last year. They would have been better than the Browns. That's not even being like hyperbolic. That's literally being true. Like, they would have just had a better defensive line. That's how bad the line that he was going out there with. I don't think there were many professional football players, or at least guys who were playing professional caliber football last year on that defensive line with him. I think that was few and far between. And even some of the guys who are professional caliber, like Jadeveon Clowney, checked out very early into the season.
All right, I know you've addressed this. 3 of the Browns' major players that you're a little bit worried about for 2023. Who are they?
Yeah, these are guys that we don't really think about, or we kind of just cash in the, hey, they'll probably be good, that I would have a little bit more concern about, because I think there's been a trend of concern. 2 of those guys are on the offensive line. Jack Conklin is one that I find interesting because a mixed match injury history that's kind of gotten us to forget that he's dipped every year as a player, the quality of play. And another guy who's dipped the quality of play every year, he's been here, is Wyatt Teller. He had that really good streak of 8 games in 2020. And he's never come close to replicating that same level of dominance that we saw from him. And it's gotten worse every year, or at least a lot further from that 2020 idealized version of him ever since that year. So you're talking about a guy who's been declining for years and years, and another guy who's been declining in their consistency, their ability to stay on the field, is Denzel Ward. Now, he doesn't miss as many games as I think as people assume, but what he does is he just disappears, right? Either he's playing elite level corner, or he dips to abysmal at times. And I worry that we have thrown a lot of those inconsistencies and a lot of these things that's kind of always exist with Denzel Ward into the pile of, oh, it was Joe Woods' fault, when that might not be 100% the case. And then we come on Sundays, he has more responsibilities. He's going to be in man more often. And then we start to realize, oh, Denzel Ward is a little bit unreliable even when he's out there. You know, maybe there was a reason he wasn't playing as much man as we wanted him to be. And then you add on top of the bad habits that they picked up defensively, especially in that secondary, there's a lot of cause for concern. Now, I don't think that these players are going to be bad this year, but if there were established players on this roster to keep a microscope on to make sure that they live up to expectations, that's who I would have minds on.
Yeah, and I think Denzel Ward will be motivated to have a good year as well, because, you know, I think he considers himself a top 5 cornerback, and in all the rankings you see he's, you know, closer to 10, sometimes out of the top 10. This is from the Bleacher Report. 9 NFL training camp battles to keep an eye on. So this is across the entire NFL. They say Browns wide receiver number 2. Candidates: Donovan Peoples-Jones, Elijah Moore, David Bell, Marquise Goodwin. Pretty safe bet that Donovan Peoples-Jones will earn a starting spot outside after setting career high in receptions, 61 yards, 839 last season. Also, 2 new faces in town, veterans Marquise Goodwin, third-year pro Elijah Moore, who flashed as a rookie before falling out of favor with the Jets. Yeah, you know, I think they're going to be playing a lot more 3 wide receiver sets, so I don't think who wide receiver 2 is that big of a deal. I think Peoples-Jones and Elijah Moore kind of interchangeable in that role.
Well, wide receiver 2 just isn't a position that actually exists, too, right? Like, that's just kind of something we use. And it's increasingly, as we see, like, these more multiple wide receiver fronts, it's increasingly becoming obsolete, right? The number 2, number 1 wide receiver. The truth is that the wide receiver position has 3 positions within the group itself, kind of like how DB has corner, slot, safety, right? We say those different positions. We just don't do the same thing with wide receiver. And the truth is, he's an X receiver, right? Amari Cooper can be a Z and a Y, and the same thing. Well, Donovan Peoples-Jones is a Y, right? So, well, no, Z, my bad. Y is a slot. So that's just, they just play different positions there. I don't know if there's going to be a battle for number 2. If you're talking about number 2 most targeted receiver on the team, maybe. But as far as like a number 2 receiver that people think of as like this role, I don't even know what the role is anymore. It's so ambiguous. But yeah, I think he has a definitive role on this team. I think Donovan Peoples-Jones, he's going to be your Z. I think you're going to have Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore trade time in both the slot and the X, but those are going to be your main 3 guys. I don't really think there's a wide receiver 1, 2, or 3 pecking order there. And I think, you know, as these passing attacks get more diverse and more used across the league, I think we're going to update our talking points to kind of work with it, because I don't know what wide receiver 2 means anymore in the NFL.
Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage, and I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we head into the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Time to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, since you guys call yourselves the voice of truth and reason, I thought I'd inject a little truth into your reason there. Here's what Dave said.
Is Kevin Stefanski the coach to bring this roster to glory? Remains to be seen, but it would be a fool's errand to write this team out of the playoffs at this point. It's also kind of interesting, you know, the questions about Coach Stefanski. I get it. He's right around 500. COVID 1 year and was Coach of the Year.
Well, see, here's the thing. You got that a little bit backwards. He earned Coach of the Year, and then he got COVID. And the question is, has he ever really been the same, or did he get COVID brain, and did that strip him of much of his creativity? Because I don't think anybody's mistaking Kevin Stefanski's offensive play calling for that of Kyle Shanahan or Andy Reid. Those guys are chess masters compared to Kevin.
All right, as always, we appreciate all of the voicemails. So this is a guy that likes to bust my chops a little bit. A couple of things that need clarity here, though. When we were talking about Kevin Stefanski, this was the graphic that was up, and it was relative to the Browns becoming one of the teams that was outside of the playoffs, getting into the playoffs. So that wasn't my comment. That was the comment of Touchdown Wire. And then Kyle Shanahan, I agree with you. He is actually a really good coach. He's been the head coach for 6 years of the 49ers. His record is 52-46. But if you take his first 3 years, he was 23-25. Now, Kevin Stefanski has been the head coach of the Browns for 3 years, and his record is 26-24. So if you give him time to develop, you may see him growing as well. Relative to Kasparov, Andy Reid, he has Patrick Mahomes. So, geez, yeah, his offense looks good. Remember, he was fired once as a head coach as well. It's kind of funny. Bill Belichick, you know, the great chess master, doesn't look as great with Mac Jones as he does with Tom Brady. It isn't COVID brain, it's the starting quarterback. He had Baker Mayfield with one arm, and he had Jacoby Brissett, a career backup. So you can argue whatever you want, but at this point, you're just looking a little foolish. I don't get it with the hate with this. I mean, Kyle Shanahan's a good coach. He was 2 games under 500 his first 3 years.
Hey, but if you take away every good thing Kevin Stefanski's ever done, he's clearly not a good head coach. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it's. I think the call is making a bit of an uncharitable argument, and then the allusion to did Kevin Stefanski get COVID and never ended up being the same coach again. I wasn't ready for that one. I was not prepared.
Oh yeah. See, you don't get to listen to a lot of this. All right.
Oh man, shout out to the producers. You know what I mean?
This is from CBS Sports. Head coaches on the hot seats. Brandon Staley from the Chargers, Kevin Stefanski. And again, you have to win. Rivera, McDaniels, McCarthy, Bowles, Allen, Arthur Smith. In year 4, we've explained, you've had a backup. You've had a quarterback that you didn't know about in Baker Mayfield. You've had a backup in Jacoby Brissett, who you thought you might have to play with 4 or 6 games. You ended up having to play 11 with him. I can't explain it away if you have Deshaun Watson for 17 games and you don't have a good season. I don't have an explanation for that. I'll be honest.
Yeah, I mean, like if they don't have a good season and this team stays relatively healthy, like the writing's clearly on the wall with what's going to happen there. Expectations are high. The budget's high for this team. You expect to win, but that doesn't change the fact that I just don't think that that's a very likely outcome. But yeah, if that does happen, then yeah, it would be obviously a hot seat season for him. And truthfully, look, whenever the expectations are high, whenever that roster number and that roster bill is high and the relative win total in the last couple of years is low, that's going to put anybody on the hot seat. Got to win.
Yep, absolutely. Now, I know you've addressed this. NFL head coaches overrated? Are they?
I think we tend to mythologize the position, right? Where we kind of, because we want to blame everything on one person that we can get rid of relatively easy, it makes us put all this importance on that one person, but they're not really that important because, again, we wouldn't be able to get rid of them as relatively. Like, think about how easy it is to get rid of a head coach. It's not hard. Now think about how hard it is to get rid of a quarterback. Like, it's much harder, right? Because the head coach just isn't as important. Is it important that you have a competent head coach? Yes, of course. But everything else past that, I think, kind of gets overrated. And even the coaches that do figure out and have great success in the NFL, they're not just head coaches. And most of the time, they're really just offensive coordinators or defensive coordinators who kind of like manage some other things on the side. So yeah, I think we kind of mythologize the role so we can scapegoat it and fire coaches for anything going wrong with the team. And I think that makes us value them too much. But look, if your roster sucks and you hire the greatest coach ever, you're going to still suck. Like, that's just what it is.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. All right. Should we be concerned about Deshaun Watson's play in bad weather? He's coming for you. He went to Clemson, nice weather. Played in Houston, nice weather. Weather's not so nice here a lot of times. Should we be concerned about that?
He's had the worst luck with weather here. Like, if you look at the relatively low sample size of home games, I think he played 2 last year, 2 or 3. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. It's either 2 or 3. And he played a home game in Cleveland when he was with Houston in 2020. Well, that home game he played in Cleveland when he was with Houston had like 75-mile-per-hour winds. And then he comes to Cleveland, and not only does he play in 75-mile-per-hour winds, it's like -0 2 times. 2 times. And the other time, I think the one good weather game he got here was the snow game against Baltimore. He has had incredibly bad luck with the weather here, so he hasn't played the best. But what I think can be helpful or is encouraging is that in the last game that he played, I think the Saints game, he played fine in the cold weather, and I think against Baltimore he played well in the cold weather. So I think he's adjusting well. But it's just funny that he's had that bad experience in his relatively low sample size playing home games in Cleveland.
Yeah, he thinks the weather's a whole lot worse than it usually is. I mean, last year there was that stretch when he came back. It was like, man, it's not usually quite that bad for football season.
Yeah, he's going to be surprised. Like, it's usually like, look, in December, it's usually just like 30 degrees. You know what I mean? Maybe a little bit of snow. Sometimes you even get some. He's going to be shocked when he gets on the field and it's just cold. Like, it's so easy to play it just cold. It's a different thing when you're playing it freezing cold and then it's windy. Like, imagine catching a football. It's hard as a brick and then it's moving in the air. And it's Deshaun Watson. It's just he's had horrible luck with the weather here. Hopefully he gets better luck.
Quincy Carey and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll hear how some of the national folks think the Browns will do in 2023. Sports for CLE. Be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports for CLE with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Jamie Erdahl from NFL Network's Good Morning Football. How far the Browns are from the top of the AFC?
I feel like it's almost like they're forgotten in the sense of they're off the radar because of maybe, Cam, to your point, of who else is in that division. This is a team, when we ask what do they have to do, maybe the answer is not a lot in the sense of I don't know that they're as far off as the perception is about them. If you look at what they did in their division a year ago, they went 3-3. They went 3-0 at home. So maybe what they need to do is win a division game or two on the road. That's where they struggled last year. They went 0-3 in those games. And then, yes, it all does come down to Deshaun Watson. And I think most people believe you're going to see a different Deshaun Watson now with everything in his past and being able to step into the season week 1. But with the run game they have, does Deshaun Watson have to play insanely lights out to be successful? Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, they're just right outside the top 5 in almost all of those rushing categories. And so a little bit, give the ball to those guys. Let them do what they do best. And, I know that Deshaun has to play better than what we saw last year. Certainly the contract necessitates that. But then when you look, again, at some of the guys and the pieces he has around them, it's not this leap. I don't think it's the leap that people think, that it's got to be this incredible, insane leap to get them into the hunt, because I think the pieces are there.
Quincy, I agree with that wholeheartedly. If he makes an insane leap, they are contenders for the AFC Championship and the Super Bowl. If he's back to, if he's back to top 5, this town will go crazy because they will be Super Bowl contenders.
Yeah. The Browns, it's been the same thing since 2019. They're a good quarterback away. They've been a good quarterback away. When they've had good quarterback play, they've been pretty close. But that's what this team is, especially now as they've added more and more to the roster. They're a good quarterback away. Well, not just a good quarterback, a top-level quarterback away. So if they get that play here from Deshaun Watson, then they're going to be just as good as any other team, because that's the only thing that's kept the Browns out of being in the same conversation when you look at their roster from the Buffalo Bills and from the Cincinnati Bengals, right? Like the Kansas City Chiefs, Pat Mahomes, they're just kind of in a different realm right now. You got to, until you beat them, you're not really on their level. But everybody else, like you look at the Bengals, you can look at the Browns roster and take some take some comparisons to them, and you're like, oh, well, the Browns could have a better roster. It's just quarterback is where that usually breaks down. And the same thing with the Buffalo Bills. If the Browns have the quarterback play to match what else is on this roster, I mean, the only team that I would say could be somebody on paper you would be more concerned about than the Browns would be the Kansas City Chiefs. But the quarterback play has to match.
Yeah, I would agree. Here's another look at that, ranking the 2023 contenders by tiers in the AFC. This is from CBS Sports. Tier 1, bona fide Super Bowl contenders. They go Chiefs, Bengals, Bills. Okay. Tier 2, wouldn't be surprised if they made a run. Jets, Ravens, Dolphins, Jaguars. Yeah, I get it. I don't know that I agree with that. If things break right, they have the Browns and the Chargers. So however you want to lay it out, those are basically the main contenders when you're talking about Chiefs, Bengals, Bills, Jets, Ravens, Dolphins, Jaguars, Browns, Chargers. Any combination of those, whomever stays most injury-free and is able to make a play or two. Things separate a team from going. Look at how many plays separated the Browns from 10 wins, and they ended up with 7 last year. You go back and you play well at the end of that Jets game, and you make a couple of other plays, and you got 10 wins. That's the way every NFL season goes.
Yeah, and honestly, they put the Browns here at tier 3. If things go right, like, sure, I would put them in tier 2 because it's like the question about quarterback, again, is the only thing that you really have about this Browns team. You look at the defensive roster, there's really nothing that really concerns you. You look at the offensive roster, there's really nothing that concerns you. The only thing that you kind of have a question about is quarterback, and that's been in a better position to be answered than it's ever been in franchise history. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, so the Browns have been putting out some hype videos, getting ready for training camp. Players will report next week to Berea. A week from Saturday, everything gets rolling. This is a David Njoku hype video.
We know this guy is an athlete, a 7-foot high jumper.
And again, the stiff arm by Njoku.
Oh, what a catch! David Njoku, touchdown! Fires, caught! David Njoku
Throws, back of the end zone.
What a catch! David Njoku jumping over a defender!
Beautifully done.
Get it to your big tight end, let him do the work, and you see the athleticism of the big fella.
Boy, that David Njoku's impressive.
Quincy, what do you think? Does he live up to the expectations in 2023? I have pretty high expectations. I think this guy can be, I don't know that he can be Travis Kelce, but he can be right below that level.
Ooh, that's high. That's high. I was expecting you
Yeah.
to be high on him.
I think it is all there for him to do. He's got to put it together.
Yeah, that's the thing, though. We've been asking David to put it together forever, which makes me feel like maybe the expectations are just a little high on him. Mm-hmm. I think he's somebody who could probably get you 600 to 800 yards. I think 800's on the high end. And that used to be great work for tight ends before Travis Kelce and Gronk and George Kittle came in here routinely getting 1,200 yards a season at receiving from the tight end position. So 800 yards, I feel like, would be a really, really nice place for him to get to. And hopefully a lot of production in the red zone that could lead to short rushing touchdowns or just touchdowns for him, period.
You got to remember, when he was drafted, hadn't played a lot at Miami University, was young. So the first couple of years, he's figuring it out. He was getting set to have a big year last year and then kind of got sidetracked a little bit by getting banged up with some injuries.
Yeah, he got sidetracked, and then there was like the whole quarterback switch out. And the one thing I can say for David is, if he can't make it happen this year, now not this year, but if he can't make it happen with this quarterback, then I'm going to have real concerns, because like Deshaun loves tight ends. So like the opportunity's golden. I can see why a lot of people are high on him. I think there's also just a lot of football to throw around. Like, you got to get the ball to Elijah Moore. You got to get the ball to Amari Cooper. You got to get Nick Chubb, his touches, his carries. You got to get, Donovan Peoples-Jones involved. And then you want to worry about David and Njoku as well. There's a lot of weapons, and that's a good thing for this Browns offense, right? They're not going to be a one-dimensional team, but as far as individual production goes, that's why I would bring it down just a little bit, just because there's a lot of mouths to feed on this offense, and I think Deshaun's going to be privy to get the football in a lot of people's hands this year.
Yeah, I would agree with you. But again, to your point, tight ends usually do really well with Deshaun Watson at quarterback. Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE, I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, JOK, facing a make-or-break season in 2023. He was injured a little bit, and he was trying to avoid defensive linemen that were getting thrown at him by offensive linemen pretty much all season. And he's undersized, so that's really problematic for him.
Well, this is the other common wisdom that's it's just wrong. How many people ever accused Pittsburgh Steelers linebacker Jack Lambert of being undersized? Well, if Lambert wasn't undersized, how can JOK be considered undersized? I don't get that.
Okay, I'm here to explain it to you. So, Jack Lambert was 6'4", 220, JOK 6'2", 220. This is a graph. Now, you see the green and the top three? Those are linemen. Now, Jack Lambert played in 1974 to 1984. There is 250 and 260-pound offensive linemen. JOK plays, this ends at 2013. The offensive linemen are all 290 to 320. That would make them 50 to 60 pounds heavier than JOK, when in Jack Lambert's era, the linemen were 15, 20 pounds heavier than him. That's how he's undersized. So now that I've explained that to you, I hope you grasp that. So Quincy, again, JOK's undersized. You can spin it any way you want. You know, Jack Lambert in 1970 to 1984, completely different football game.
Nobody's going to label a 6'4" football player. My bad. Go ahead.
There were no 300-pound offensive linemen in the 70s.
And Jack Lambert's 6'4".
Right. 220. Now, he was 220, so he weighs the same amount. But the problem was linemen were 260 back in those days. So Jack Lambert would have been like, what is that behemoth doing running me over? Because he would have got run over.
By the way, they were much lighter and not as fast. It's a different game. I think even with Jack Lambert played before the modern era, so he's not even in the same consideration of modern era football. It's not a fair comp that you can use. A comp that you can use is what if you want to use a comp. And to really get the scope of how undersized JOK is, Ray Lewis was considered undersized when he got drafted into the NFL in 2004. Now, again, linebackers were heavier back then, but he was, 240, 6 foot?
Yeah.
Undersized. You know what I mean? And again, if nobody's going to call somebody who's 6'5" in football, maybe in basketball, but in football, if you're 6'5", nobody's calling you undersized. Name me the one 6'5" person in the league right now that we're calling undersized. I would love to know. Even if a kicker was 6'5", we not calling him undersized. Nobody. If you're 6'5", you're top 1% in all height percentile. You're not small. You're not undersized at that point. There's no undersides at 6'5".
All right. Every AFC team's last division title. This is from NBC Sports tweeting this out. So the Browns were 1989. Remember, that's back when they had 250-pound offensive linemen playing. Raiders, Jets have the next longest droughts with 2002. So, man, when I saw that, 89 is the last time the Browns won a division. And
I mean,
don't tell me anything about rabid fan bases, because for a fan base to have gone that long without a division title and to still be as crazy as they are about the Browns, doesn't happen anywhere else.
You have to include, there's like 4 or 5 seasons where he just didn't have a football team,
right?
Which kind of like accounts for that, and that's when all the division stuff shifted around.
Yeah, but they came back in '99. It's 2020.
It's
they came back in '99.
Like, they haven't won the AFC North since its inception. The thing I'll say though is like, it's not the same as not making the playoffs, right? Not winning your division. And as much as people like to brag about winning the division, once you have to brag about the division, Cincinnati Bengal fans, yes, I'm talking to you. Once you're down to bragging about the division, it's kind of pathetic, because like, are you buying the 2021 AFC North Division Champion T-shirt like it's the Super Bowl shirt? Like, are you the one person buying that? You know what I mean? Division championships, they're technically shirt and T-shirt games, but like, they're not shirt and T-shirts you about to wear. So it's kind of pointless. You got to make the playoffs. Again, if this team doesn't win the division, but they make the playoffs, it's not going to make a difference to me. I could really care less. The only thing it makes a difference for is whether you get a home playoff game or whether you don't. And unless the Browns are in contention to be one of the top 2 seeds, then I don't really know if the home field early is as important as being able to figure out who you want to be slotted against when it comes to your opponent in the playoffs, because I think the matchup's a little bit more important there. So yeah, division, it would be nice if they won a division championship, but it's clearly not there. It's not even close to the end all be all. Like, if you lose in the first round but you win your division, are you still buying the shirt to commemorate the season? I want to know. Bengal fans, y'all bought the shirts when y'all only won the division and then lost in the playoffs in the first round, because y'all did that for a long time down there in Cincinnati, about 35 years or something like that. You know what I mean? So let me know if you're a Cincinnati fan and the thing. Call in and let us know. Do you buy the shirt when y'all lose the first round? You know what I mean? To commemorate the season.
Browns fans might be buying the shirt. It's been since '89. They might be buying the shirt. All right.
We might. I'm just saying. But they do. They bought the shirt. Do they put the banner up? You know what I mean? Do they have enough respect for themselves not to put the banner up? Like, I go to Paul Brown Stadium and I go see 2013 division champion Cincinnati Bengals. Like, am I going to see that? Like, y'all the Clippers? Like, that's what the Clippers do. You know what I mean? Shout out to the Bengals. The Clippers of the NFL.
All right. Before I let you go.
Even when they good, nobody cares. Okay, I'm done now.
I know you've done this. Tell me why give me the reason every team in the AFC North could fail. So we're looking at what could go wrong for every team in the AFC North in 2023.
The Ravens, I think it's plain and simple. It is something that we're not overlooking because we have had Todd Monken, but I think everybody else is overlooking, which is like, why are we assuming that Todd Monken's just going to fix the offense? Like, was Todd Monken disrespected when he was on the Browns?
Well, remember, it was Freddie. He was Freddie Kitchens' offensive coordinator, so he didn't get really the chance to coordinate the offense.
Come on, Dave. You think Freddie was really running the show? We went from running a bunch of play-action plays to all of a sudden running a spread and throwing the ball 45 times a game. I don't think that was Freddie Kitchens. I think that was Todd Monken. You know what I mean? Because that offense in 2019 looked like every other Todd Monken offense, which is why I see. And you know what else accompanies Todd Monken offenses in the NFL? A lot of interceptions. And the thing I'm worried about what they're going to be asking Lamar Jackson to do is, I don't think that's where his strengths are as a passer. I think he has other strengths. I think a Shanahan-style system would suit him better because he's really good in the intermediate, on-the-run area of the field. But when you ask Lamar to stand in there and throw deep down the field, that's not where he beats you. He can stand in the pocket and beat you short and middle all day, but he's not going to beat you deep holding on to the ball for an extra couple seconds to get the ball downfield. He's just his least accurate there. That's always been what he is. Even if you look back at his Louisville tape, you'll see that. So that's my concern about the Ravens. And also, like, they're really relying on Odell Beckham, who he's up there in age, y'all. Yeah, he was up there in age when he was in Cleveland. He's about 32, coming off of like 2 catastrophic knee injuries. And they're definitely relying on him to be like a quasi 1, definitely 2 wide receiver for them. I don't know if that's a good role for him. You look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, I mean, like, where's the offense going to come from? And is the defense really that good to overcome it when they've lost pieces itself over the last couple of years? So you can see some obvious issues there. When you look at the Cincinnati Bengals, they don't have as many flaws, but let's be real, it's the Bengals. They probably peaked, right? They're not going to the Super Bowl anytime soon again. That's probably what's happening. The Clippers don't get to go to the Super Bowl 2 times. That's not, come on. Like, the Cincinnati Clippers ain't doing nothing. Like, we're not even worried about it. All right. I hope that clip gets shared. And then the Browns, obviously, like, hey, if Deshaun Watson does not work out, this is going to be the same team that went 7-10 or 9 wins or 8 wins the last 3-4 years. So they really need that upgrade at quarterback play. It's not an 100% thing whether they're going to get that upgrade at quarterback play, but they probably will be better than the Clippers.
All right. Quincy Carrier, as always, great stuff. Thanks for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much, Quincy.
No problem.
All right, Quincy Carrier, make sure you check him out. Always really good stuff. Untitled, unfiltered Browns coverage as well. We're going to step aside, continue talking Browns. Jackson McCurry, the Dawgland and Top Dogs podcast straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. This is from the Mina Kimes Show. Mina Kimes and Steve Palazzolo from PFF talking about what the Browns' defensive additions mean for Myles Garrett.
It's been the Myles Garrett show in Cleveland, and he's still been awesome. He was the most double-teamed pass rusher in football last year. So he is joined by Zadarius Smith, who I imagine will use outside, inside, and then Obo Okonronko, bringing in those guys and then putting them in the Jim Schwartz defense where they'll be rushing from a pretty wide alignment. I think it should look pretty good, and I wouldn't be surprised, Steve, if Myles Garrett actually has a better season than the ones he's had because of it.
It's one of the most difficult things in football sometimes is when last year during the season you were trying to make a case for Myles Garrett for Defensive Player of the Year, but because the Browns defense was terrible, I don't think he had the same sack totals as Nick Bosa and Micah Parsons. And it's like, of course it's Nick Bosa and Micah Parsons. Of course it's a two-horse race. It's like, look at every metric. Myles Garrett's produced in every system that they've had anyway, so he'll continue to produce, but now he has help. I think the Browns turned a massive weakness, which was their entire defensive line, into potentially one of the best in the NFL.
Let's welcome in Jackson McCurry from the Dawgland and Top Dogs podcast. Jackson, we hear this, and the additions, I think, are huge. I think the addition of Jim Schwartz, just because of what he does, might unlock Myles Garrett even more so than the personnel. And you know, I'm splitting hairs there, but I think the combination, don't underestimate how the system will work to Myles Garrett's benefit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you look at Schwartz's background in Tennessee with Javon Curse, in Detroit with Ndamukong Suh, Ezekiel Ansah, and then in Philly with Derek Barnett and Fletcher Cox and all those guys on the Eagles defensive front. He has made defensive lines so much better wherever he's gone throughout his career. And, you know, you added a great supporting cast to go alongside Myles, and then you add Jim Schwartz, who has a knack for getting the best out of defensive fronts. Like Steve Palazzolo said it, Myles has been productive and with whoever the defensive coordinator's been, but I think this is just the perfect fit for what Myles has been as a player. And I feel like we haven't seen the best out of Myles yet, and I feel like this year could be that year finally.
Yeah, I would agree with you. So take a look at this. This is kind of eye-opening in terms of just how good Myles Garrett was. Teams with the fewest sacks last season, this is from Sunday Night Football on NBC. You see the Bears had 20, Falcons had 21, Raiders 27, Bengals 30, the Packers and the Browns had 34, and Garrett had 16 of them. When you look at that, it's just, it kind of slaps you across the face how much they struggled to get pressure on the quarterback a season ago.
Yeah, I mean, at times they generated a lot of pressure. They just couldn't put it all together. I mean, Jordan Elliott had over 20 pressures. Clowney got a lot of pressures. I mean, a lot of those guys were able to generate pressure. They just couldn't put it all together in terms of sacks. And you hope with Jim Schwartz, which I did some digging, when he was in Tennessee and Detroit, he only averaged around 35 sacks per year. I mean, his talent that he coached. But then in Philly, he averaged about 42. So the Browns had 34, so the bar is already set there based on what Schwartz did in Tennessee and Detroit. But if he can do what he did in Philly with the cast of characters that he had there and with the additions the Browns made on the defensive line this offseason, you would have to think the Browns can definitely hit the 40-sack mark, and they may even get higher just because you have two of the best in Myles and Zadarius Smith. Okoronkwo's shown he can get after it, and so does Dalvin Tomlinson.
Yeah, the other thing that I think will help keeping the guys fresh. So the rotation, the whole purpose of that is they don't get as banged up. They have more energy. You spread out the workload because television does not show how much offensive and defensive lines beat on one another in an NFL football game.
For sure. That's the most physical part of the game, I think, is what happens in the trenches. And I think that's why the Browns are now benefiting from the depth that they have. You look at the edge position, you have Alex Wright, who's coming into his second year, Isaiah McGuire, who was the team's third-round pick. Then you look in the interior, you hope, Jordan Elliott, Perrion Winfrey, those guys, Maurice Hurst, Tristan Hill, some of the other additions that they made in free agency. The Browns have a lot of depth on that defensive line now. We'll see who shakes out in training camp and in the preseason, but this is what Schwartz liked. He talked about in minicamp that he wants to treat this like a bullpen and rotate guys in and out. Then we get in the fourth quarter, if you have Zadarius Smith and Myles Garrett fresh and Dalvin Tomlinson fresh, that's going to be a nightmare for opposing offenses late in games.
Yeah, and keep in mind, very rarely do offensive lines rotate guys in and out. So that's the thought behind rotating them. Executives, coaches, scouts ranking the NFL top 10 positions, ESPN.com. Today we're going to look at tight ends for 2023. Not a surprise. Travis Kelce 1, George Kittle 2, Mark Andrews checks in at 3. David Njoku, honorable mention, an NFC offensive coach, rare blend of speed, power, and strength, a lot of upside, has never quite put it all together, but every offense would love to have that guy. He's perfect for what Cleveland does. The other thing that's important, and I touched on this a little bit earlier when we were talking about Njoku, he was really raw out of Miami and young. So, again, he's got to put an entire season together. He was on track to do that, but again, I think he could end up being a top 5 tight end, maybe even a top 3.
Yeah, he definitely has the physical tools. You're right. When we drafted him out of Miami, he was 21 years old, wasn't a great blocker, had problems catching the football. He slowly put it together in his first 6 years here. Last year was a career year. I mean, that mentioned it in that article on ESPN.com. Obviously, injuries played a role, dealing with the shuffling of the quarterback position, which he's had to deal with his entire run here in Cleveland. But yeah, everything's there for Njoku to break out. I'm with you. I think he has the talent to be a top 5, maybe even a top 3 tight end in the league. It's hard to go against the likes of a Travis Kelce and a George Kittle, but Njoku has all the talent, in my opinion. And Quincy mentioned it earlier. Deshaun loves throwing to the tight end. Jordan Akins had success with him in Houston. I don't see why David Njoku can't do that, because I think all the talent is there for him to succeed. I agree with you, and I think he could be a guy that hits some of those seam routes that are sure to be opened up with Deshaun Watson as a quarterback. Jackson McCurry from the Dawgland Top Dogs podcast now. I'm going to step aside, take a quick timeout. We head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Jackson McCurry from the Dawgland and Top Dogs podcast. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, this is a very long-time Browns fan from Berea, and I always try to look on the bright side of things, and I was just wondering, the Browns start off a tough schedule, kind of a murderer's row with division opponents, and is one advantage to that you would see the teams, perhaps the Browns team won't have as many injuries as later in the season, and if you like your roster compared to your opponents, maybe it stacks up pretty good. The flip side to that is perhaps you don't have the kinks worked out with so many movable parts. Thank you.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Jackson, I think there's a couple of layers to that. Yes, the injuries, the health is one thing. The other thing is it's going to be a new offensive system. You can say whatever you want. It's going to look different with Deshaun Watson at quarterback. And Jim Schwartz's defensive scheme will be different than what the Browns had. Now, you're going to go back and look at the Eagles and the Titans and know what Jim Schwartz does, but not with this personnel. So there is some benefit, but the flip side of it is they got some kinks to iron out.
Yeah, definitely. I think like the base of the defense is going to stay the same. Schwartz runs a 4-3, Woods ran a 4-3, so that's going to be different. There's obviously going to be differential things than what Schwartz called and what Woods called, but you're right about the offense. Like, this is a completely new offense with Deshaun as the full-time starting quarterback, but they've had the whole offseason to work on that. Watson's been working with the guys, but yeah, the first couple of weeks there's going to be kinks to work out, but you get to go against the best. You're going against your divisional rivals, like I think 3 out of the first 4 or 5 games of the year. So that's going to be tough, but Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how these first few weeks shake out for the Browns, just because you're going against your division rivals. So you can't afford to lose these games, but at the same time, you're still probably going to be working some things out. I think that's also the benefit of why the Browns have 4 preseason games, so they have an extra week to potentially work on some things in terms of the new offense and new defense as well.
Yeah, and they do have the joint practices. I believe it's in Philadelphia against the Eagles. So I'm curious to see, do they play their starters a little bit more? Because and I don't think it'll happen in the first preseason game. Do they play them in the second, third, and fourth preseason games a little bit? Just because they got to play well the first 5 games, first 5 weeks.
Yeah, definitely. Because like you said, we play the Bengals, we play the Steelers, and we play the Ravens. I think all in the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season is going to be tough. Just open up the season. You can't afford to lose any games in the division, because you're looking for that division title, you're looking to try to get a potential home field spot in the playoffs, but you can't afford to lose those games. So maybe they do play them a little bit more, but at the same time in the preseason, you can't avoid your key guys getting injured, because that could derail the whole season instantly. Yeah, that's a balance that they're going to have to walk, and Kevin Stefanski has erred on the side of not playing guys because of that injury concern. All right, this from NFL Network's Good Morning Football. Seahawks safety Julian Love, Malik Jackson, talking about their thoughts on the Browns in 2023 as a possible playoff team.
Despite finishing last in the division, they actually have a really good roster. When you look at offense, obviously you have Watson, you have Chubb, you have Cooper, you have Moore, and that offense is pretty good. They just have to open up the pass game a little more. On defense, you add guys like Dalvin Tomlinson and Juan Thornhill to a really solid defensive front, defensive secondary, with Greg Newsome, with Denzel Ward. And so on paper, they're a good team. Yeah. Now they just have to compete in, like you said, a tough division. And it's going to take their all. And the guys have to stay on the field, have to stay healthy, and be ready to go.
Yeah, I think guys have to stay healthy, stay on the field, and be available. But I also think Coach Stefanski needs to get the defense together. Last year was no secret about the Garrett and Clowney situation. I think Coach really needs to get that defense together, get guys together, create a clear hierarchy, and let everybody understand that and just move on.
And Jackson, I think that's one of the things Jim Schwartz is. I think the hierarchy is there, and I think Jim Schwartz has brought that in, and it's probably already in place.
Yeah, definitely. Jim Schwartz is the hierarchy of the Browns defense. I'm not worried about Myles Garrett's leadership. I'm not worried about Denzel Ward's leadership. Jim Schwartz probably set the tone in April when the guys came back for OTAs. He's the guy. They're going to follow him. I don't care about player leadership and being a vocal leader or anything. Just go out, follow what Schwartz does, execute, go sack the quarterback or go create a turnover. That's all it is at the end of the day. Jim Schwartz has done this for a long time. He learned under the greatest of all time in Bill Belichick. And I'm not worried about, Myles being that vocal leader or anything that Malik Jackson talked about today on Good Morning Football. The parts and pieces are all there on the defense for this defense to take it up a notch and to ease the burden a bit of the offense. So I think the talent is all there, both defensively and offensively. The Browns just have to go out and execute.
Yeah, I agree with you. And we talked about that a little bit earlier in the show. You can't be something you're not. If you're not vocal, you're not vocal. People can sense when you're putting on a show for them, and they don't respond to that in a locker room by and large. This is from Warren Sharp Football, ranking the NFL's top offensive lines. So they go Eagles 1, Lions 2, Ravens 3, Chiefs 4, and the Browns 5. So some have them ranked as high as 2, being the Browns' offensive line. Sharp has them ranked 5. Despite the injuries to the right side of their line, Browns finished 3rd in pass block win rate and return all 5 starters from last season. It's a fair ranking just because there are concerns about guys staying healthy. Conklin, Teller have been banged up. But when you return the same 5 guys, you do start with an advantage.
Yeah, for sure. The continuity's been there, especially with Bill Callahan leading that position room. All 5 starters are back, like Warren Sharp mentioned. They were top 10 in both pass blocking and run blocking, according to PFF last year. But you got to hope that, Teller's had the injury bug bite him the last couple of years, especially, and also Jack Conklin. and even Jedrick Wills. So I think the biggest key this season is staying healthy. You hope Jed Wills takes a step forward this year. It's his 4th year. It's kind of a make or break year for him. They did pick up the option, but it's time for Wills to step up. And they also have to adapt to Watson's style of play. They've dealt with pocket passers like Baker Mayfield and Jacoby Brissett and Case Keenum the last couple of years, but now you got Watson, who is more mobile, tends to extend plays with his legs. So that's something that the offensive line also has to adjust to this season as well. But yeah, being top 5, even being 5th, it's not a bad thing. The Browns have been consistent under Bill Callahan's watch and in this style of offense, and I don't expect that to change barring unforeseen injuries in 2023.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that's a really valid point about adjusting to Deshaun Watson's style. They're going to have to block, an extra 1/10 of a second, half a second, because you never know. We saw that in the limited time he played last season. There were times you thought he was sacked, and then it was like, he's not sacked. And they just threw the ball downfield. So they're going to have to continue to stay on their blocks, which is a mindset that they're going to have to adapt to.
Yeah, and I think, I brought up Jed Wills. I think that's the biggest thing, because you've seen him on tape. He'll make a block and then he'll just let it go. But then when you have a guy like Deshaun Watson who can extend plays, Wills has to be more aware. Bitonio's dealt with mobile style quarterbacks. Posick has in Seattle with Russell Wilson. Jack Conklin did with Marcus Mariota. So some guys know how to deal with mobile quarterbacks. So Jedrick Wills needs to really lean on that veteran leadership. But yeah, when you have a mobile quarterback, you have to seek to play through, just because you don't know if Watson's going to give you that added time with his mobility.
Jackson McCurry, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Jackson. Appreciate it.
Yep. Appreciate you having me on, Dave. Thanks.
Jackson McCurry. Make sure you check him out. The Dawgland and Top Dogs podcast. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.